financial bodies and the state of affairs there. So on the environmental side, I'll be the first to say I want stronger action. I'll be the first to say, so in the wake of the IPCC recent report, the special report, some people visited my office to call on greater action, and I had already drafted a letter to the speaker, and I've already submitted it, and tomorrow I'll be in Ottawa Rising, ask for an emergency debate on this issue to say, you know, scientists have called for, this isn't for urgent, they've said this is incredibly urgent, and we as politicians should, and I've talked to Minister McKenna, and she said, great, let's do that, so it'll be up to the speaker whether that gets granted. But I think we as politicians should be talking about this in a more urgent way. I will say, just from my view from the inside, is politics moves a lot more slowly, and so when I look at when I look at all governments in the history of Canada ever since this issue was being discussed, in the last 3 years, we have measures to phase out coal, we have measures that will significantly strengthen methane emission rules, we have a carbon price that we're fighting tooth and nail with the provinces for, and so we're absolutely not Tories on this issue, and it's escalating. So if you talk to Pembina Institute, for example, they'll say you're not going to get where you want to get to yet, but if that $10 increase happens beyond 2022, you will meet your 2030 target. And so if there is a continuing incremental approach to that, and maybe once we've got the price measure in place and we are delivering the monies back to citizens, it'll be that much easier to increase beyond 2022, beyond a $10 per year increment. What remains to be seen. And the last thing, it's not billions and billions of dollars to fossil, without question.
200 billion.
In Canada, at the federal level, it's certainly not anywhere close to that we are subsidizing fossil fuels, not even remotely close to that. What we have spent billions of dollars on.
We're not taxing.
What we have spent billions of dollars on, and bracket the pipeline in question for the time being. When you look at transit investments, you look at green infrastructure investments, and I would say we should spend more money on clean energy investments, but there has been hundreds of millions of dollars on clean energy investments. We're recognizing I would agree with you that we should do more. My general view, though, is why I favor a carbon price approach is because the government is not ever going to be the best at picking the technology and picking the winners,
right.
And imposing the appropriate floor price is I think, government's fundamental role. The last thing I will say on the pipeline, I don't know that the economics of purchasing it work out all that well, but my argument on that, when you look at the cost per ton to reduce carbon emissions, to block that pipeline, we are talking in the thousands of dollars per ton of emission reduction. When you look around the world at other ways of reducing carbon emissions, not that the government's committed to this yet, but there's a plausible argument to say we're not going to block the pipeline, but we are going to take any revenue generated from that pipeline and make sure that we use it to reduce carbon emissions, and then it will actually be, it could potentially be carbon neutral, all things considered. So, for example, there are two economists that did a paper talking about peat fires in Indonesia, and Norway has sent money from their country to Indonesia to reduce the peat fires, and we're talking not thousands of dollars per ton of emission reduction, we're talking pennies. So there are efficient ways to reduce emissions and potentially much more inefficient ways to reduce emissions, and so the question is that particular project and stopping that particular project, of the universe of options of reducing emissions, can it fit within our overarching plan to meet our obligations? And if that blows us past our targets, then I would say that we've completely failed in our goal. But if it fits within an overarching plan to meet our emissions, and I've seen arguments from the minister's office that absolutely that is the case, and they've got their projections, then it's not an easy thing to accept, but I'm willing to accept it if it means we're meeting our obligations in some. I don't know if you want to chip in on any of that or chip in on the IMF question.
Yeah, because there's some real, obviously, honest, authentic emotion that comes from, like, I don't want to be seen as, like, one of these talking heads that says, well, interest rates are going to go up, so the deficit, you can't do anything. And, like, for me, like, when I look at these documents, they're almost not readable on budgetary documents. And again, as a fiscal person, and I've had these conversations with Nate, it's for me as a fiscal person, and budgets are supposed to be fiscal plans.